Arcturus Mandala. So what happened in those 3 months on your way to India?
Well, I stayed in London, and I wanted to find out what happened to the band. I looked up
Oh yeah.
when I first got there. Our bass player's girlfriend in England was the one who got me in the country. And then the next day I met our manager, and he put me up with Jeff Beck, who at that time he was managing Jeff Beck Group, and Jeff Beck was using our old equipment. And so I ended up staying for about a week with Jeff Beck, or maybe 2 weeks. And then I moved out of there and moved into somebody else. And then after that, when I was getting ready to leave, I moved in with John Peel. And
Okay.
John Peel's the one. John Peel's the one who drove me to the airport to leave.
Okay. Okay. So you really did have a close relation. Quite, John Peel and you were really quite close
Oh
together.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure,
And
absolutely,
he
absolutely.
mentions that on some of the interviews quite a lot.
Yeah,
So,
but he loved
what,
it. He loved us. I mean, absolutely.
but
He loved us as people.
so he knew he drove you off to the kind of airport for your journey off to India, and
Right.
so you had this Bhagavatam with. I just actually looked up at Chipperwada where it was. It's actually in Chandni, off Chandni Chowk in Old Delhi.
Yeah.
That's where you went.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the
Paharganj,
most yeah.
behind Paharganj. Yeah.
And it was the Sri Radha Vallabha temple, okay?
Right.
And apparently, what I've read as well, just checked up, was that's where Prabhupada had spent much time going from Vrindavan, going to Delhi, working on translating that Bhagavatam that you had a copy of. That's why
Right.
the address was there. That was his kind of Delhi base, really.
Exactly.
The book
Yeah.
was printed there and everything like that. But it was
Yep.
very... Can you describe... And did you spend the night there, or how long did you
No,
spend?
no.
No?
No, I went there. At first it was hard to find because you talk about a maze. It was a maze in there, and little lanes going into lanes and cows and all kinds of stuff. And so I finally got to this little room, and it's all dark in there, and I saw Shiva Lingam, and I didn't see any deities, but some young Indian comes out, because there was no foreigners coming, and then I mentioned Swamiji, which is what we called him then. And he said, "Oh, this is where he used to stay." And up on the side of the room, in the main room, there was like a loft, just a loft. You could go up the stairs to a loft on the side of the room. It wasn't a floor. And that was and he took me up there, and Prabhupada had a little place to sleep, and it was a little loft. That was it. That was ISKCON.
What were you dressed as when you got off that plane in India, in Delhi, at the airport? Did you go straight from there to try and find Chippywada, or did you, or is that did you get a taxi, or
Yeah.
did you get a bus or something like that?
No, I got a rickshaw. Rickshaw.
From the
A rickshaw.
airport. From the
Yeah.
airport. Wow.
Or I don't know where from. It was Palm Airport. I just remember I got out of the airport and took a rickshaw to this place, and then they took me to the edge of the slum, and I had to go in there and find it. And nobody, it was like really hard.
So you had your Western clothes on. You hadn't got any
No,
Indian
when I was in London, Jeff Beck introduced me to these girls, one of whom was his girlfriend. He was going to go see his girlfriend, and he said, "Come along." He took me along. He took me everywhere. And so we get over there, and it's like in the heart of London. There's this big area which is like a park, and you go inside there, and there's this really private house. It must have been really wealthy people. A long driveway. It was like in London. And so these like three girls living there, and they were making clothes for all the rock stars. They were like rich girls making clothes for the rock stars. So I was sitting there with, at a table, and right opposite the table was this guy, the drummer of Jimi Hendrix,
Mitch Mitchell.
Mitch Mitchell. He's sitting there smoking a joint, and I'm sitting there with him, and Jeff's downstairs with this girl, and then I became friends with these girls, and so before I left, I told them I was going to India. Even Jeff, everybody's, "Oh man, are you crazy?" So I'm going to India, so I need some clothes. So they made something out of white cotton for me, like pants with just a kind of a half Indian thing. It was kind of tied on the side, and I wore that to India, and then once I got to the ashram, then there was that was going to stop.
Okay, so
This is ridiculous.
so you went to the Chippywada place, but you didn't even spend the night there.
No, I wasn't invited to either.
Okay, you just went there. So then what did you thought?
They told me Swamiji's gone to Vrindavan.
I see. Okay. And how did you go? By train? Did you go by train from Delhi to Mathura?
Yeah, by train. Yeah,
And,
right.
and then like a tonga from the station to Vrindavan. That's how
Right,
we. I,
right.
did, I even when I went later, that's how we used to go. Used to go to Mathura
Right,
station.
right.
It was quite magical, that little tonga ride going from there in those days.
Yeah.
It seemed to go on forever. It was like a magical world. Time changed, and
When I got there, when I finally got to Radha Damodar Temple, it was getting dark. I didn't know where I was going to stay. And Radha Damodar Temple, I knocked on a door, and some old lady opens and peeks out and closes the door, and then somebody else, I knocked more, and this old Goswami comes with these big thick glasses, like telescope glasses, and he's telling me in Hindi, that Swamiji wapas chala gaya, America gaya, hawajaz mein America gaya. He's telling me in Hindi that I didn't understand then, and so I'm like, well, can I stay here? No. No, you can stay here. Where can I go? I don't know where to go. So he wrote something down in Hindi and gave it to me. And so I showed people and followed this. And I ended up at Ban Maharaja's ashram. Okay. And he also wasn't there. They thought I was talking about Ban Maharaj. I came to say, because it was nighttime. And they were just having their kirtan. And they came out, and I was at the gate. And they came out and said, this one Swamiji, Madhav Madhavananda Maharaj, spoke a little bit of English. He said, yes. And so I said, I'm looking for Swamiji. He said, Swamiji's going to Bombay, I'm thinking, Bombay? Because he thought I was talking about his guru.
Okay, yeah.
And then I mentioned Bhaktivedanta, and he said, oh, yeah, that's our guru's, that's Gurudev's Gurubai. Because they referred to Ban Maharaj as Gurudev. Yeah. But he's in Bombay. He's coming back after 1 month, Can I stay here? No. This is a strict place, I mean, don't anybody who tells you that the Gaudiya Math is jealous of ISKCON because we have more men. I'm telling you, man, they don't want more men. They don't want those kind of men for sure, And so I said, well, can I stay and meet him? Well, you can stay here, but you have to follow all these rules, and you can't touch this, and you can't do this. So okay, I just so I was basically untouchable for about a month until Ban Maharaj came. If I would step on somebody's shadow, on their shadow, they would take a bath and yell and scream too,
So you never thought, oh, maybe I should move. There was nowhere else to go. That was it. You didn't know what, that was it.
This is it.
And you were in
where
India.
I ended up.
So you're in India on a false passport, on a ticket paper, and so that means the visa, everything. And you're there, you're 20 years old.
The ticket to India I had to get when I was in London. I didn't have enough money to go to India.
Okay.
I had enough money to go to London. So when I was in London, I remember the last money, the last money to get the ticket. You know how I got it? Jim McCarthy, the drummer of the Yardbirds. Yeah. I had a fringe jacket. Some guy in Haight-Ashbury had given me a buckskin fringe jacket, And so I went to Jim McCarty and asked if he wanted to buy it to help me get the ticket in. So he bought it from me, In the book about me, it said that John Peel did that, but actually the truth is it was Jim McCarty.
Okay. Though every young hippie of that day that was part of their kind of like dream fantasy, to have a fringed leather jacket and the boots. That was the look. Hey man,
later on, Jeff Beck wore that jacket.
Okay. Amazing. Okay.
Not with the Yardbirds, but he borrowed it from Jim McCarty.
So that was enough money from that jacket to get your ticket to India.
That plus whatever else I had. That was enough money. I think he bought it for 50 quid. 50 quid he bought that jacket.
So you had hardly any money when you arrived in India. Nothing at all. Okay.
I had like maybe 20 quid or something.
Okay. So Bhaktivedanta Swami and the Hare Krishna movement has its origins in a parent organization called the Gaudiya Mutt that was established by somebody called Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in 1917 in Bengal. His father was Kedaranath Dutt, who became Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he was the first Indian Bengali that had a vision that this tradition that was based in Bengal called Gaudiya Vaishnavism had relevance for the international world, and that was in the end of the 19th century that was happening. And the religion of that, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, is from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in Bengal in 1486 in February. And that tradition spread and spread and spread, and it's the philosophy of bhakti. So it went through a whole journey, that religion, and then eventually came to this Victorian and the modern period, and there was a class of Bengalis that were trained in English, and they understood about the world, Christianity, philosophers, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's son, who was later called Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, created an organization called the Gaudiya Mutt. And was very charismatic, very scholarly. Bhaktivedanta Swami met him in 1920 when he was a student, and he was part of the Gandhi freedom movement, and one of his friends took him to see him. His family were traditionally followers of Chaitanya, but he hadn't been very convinced of the teachers. But when he saw Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he thought, this person is worthy of my respect. And on their very first meeting, he was told by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that your mission, you're an educated person in English, spread this to the Western world. So that in this organization that was from Bengal, there was a kind of a directive that was focused on kind of not just in India or Bengal, but it was expansion. But after Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati passed in 1937, the organization kind of, you could say, it fractured into different separate little, rather than a united group, they were all these different various teachers, the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who were called God brothers or Guru Bhais to Bhaktivedanta Swami, who was later could be called Srila Prabhupada. At that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had the title of Prabhupada, but we won't make it too complicated. So there you have a little introduction for people who don't really understand, because the next part of the story is we're really going away from the misunderstood, from the psychedelia of London, of Jeff Beck, and we're going into this other very esoteric world. And as I say, the other, like Cherry Red Records and the other Ugly Things and the other podcasts I've watched, they've gone really deeply into the whole story of the misunderstood. But they don't. It's such a deep subject and foreign to most of them. Whereas me and Rishikesh, even though there's 10 years difference, I actually took initiation in 1974 from Bhaktivedanta Swami and got the name Mathuradas, and you got the name from him in Stinton Beach. Anyway, you got that in August in 67. You know, right. But we are Guru Bhais, and just in the same way that we have the same guru, Bon Maharaj, where is the ashram where Rick has come as a 20-year-old, where it's so conservative and so unconnected with anything Western. And very traditional concepts of caste and things like that. So like you were saying,
and also very traditional Gaudiya, siddhanta, Gaudiya lifestyle, Gaudiya Vaishnavata or Vaishnava etiquette. All the things that happened in the Gaudiya Math were happening there.
Yes.
And every Gaudiya Math did the same thing.
Yes.
It was a bhajan place.
Yes.
You were there to develop your love for Krishna, so that at the time of death, you think of Krishna. Because you think of whatever you're most attached to. And so the whole purpose of people being in that ashram was to get out of Maya. And by falling in love with Krishna through association with like-minded devotees in a situation where there's no sex, no women, no enjoyment, no pleasure, hardly anything to eat. Some of the ashrams where Bon Maharaj had his ashrams, like Nandagram, you had to beg. I had to get used to begging, and I got so used to it that the Brijabasi people didn't even pay any notice to me. I was like this different color than the others, but I was speaking the same language, and I was right there with them, and they got used to that over the years, seeing me beg, or Adesham, and they throw some bajra roti or something in a bag. Take those bajra rotis back and put them in a little pot and put lake water in there. Lake water, because there was no bottled water. It's lake water from Pavan Sarva. And then you filter it through a cloth and you put that in there with the chips and then let them soak for about an hour. And then it all turns to mush. And then that's what you eat. That's food,
I'm just also for the benefit of the other listeners. So where Rick has ended up is a place called Brindavan. It's about 3-4 hours from Delhi. More people are more familiar with the Taj Mahal in Agra. So if you're leaving Delhi on your way to see the Taj Mahal, you will go through the town of Mathura. I'm named after that place, Mathura Das. And it's a district called the Mathura Mandala, and it's a very, very ancient city. It's one of the most ancient cities in India. You've got Kasi, Varanasi, Mathura, and a few other cities which go back to antiquity. And
it's the birthplace of Krishna. Krishna's birthplace, actually.
Exactly. And across the river, the two big holy rivers in India start up in the mountains, they come down to the plains, and the Jamuna River comes through Braj, and it hence starts going towards the Bay of Bengal, meets the Ganga at Prayag, where you get the meeting. So there's this thing called the Diob, which is the land between the Ganga and the Jamuna, just north of Delhi, and it comes down. And then in those days, so before Prabhupada had left his family, gone through his story before coming to the West, he'd spent quite a lot of years in Brindavan, in this Radha Damodar temple. He'd rented rooms. And this Brindavan, I first went there in 76, and even then it was very sleepy. Even it wasn't, was very different in those days. You know, it only just got its independence in 1947. The economy was not booming. People didn't have much money. And people went to Brindavan. It's a small town with ancient temples and very, very simple life. When we first went there, even in 76, we went to the Vogel Ashram. There was no cots or beds or anything. We're all on the floor and everything like that. So, and so it was and also it's interesting because you've had this very brief experience in San Francisco, what it means, like devotees, you're living in a flat, you're hearing kirtan, and suddenly this ashram that you're going into, very, very. I mean, no
Orthodox.
No foreigner yet in the history had experienced this traditional. What the foreigners were getting in America, and as the Krishna movement spread, was based on this lifestyle, and it was but because of the nature of what the Krishna movement was, the context of where the ashrams was, it was, and also we're all foreigners, it was a new culture. So you're in an ashram, and not only that, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, India's very big with many states, and this is coming from Gaudiya, or from the eastern part of Bengal. Okay, Gaudiya was a kingdom near Calcutta, and it was called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So most of those, were they every member of the ashram, were they Bengalis, or would you say that or not?
One of them was from Bihar. Vasudev Prabhu was from Bihar. And there was a Babaji there named Lalit Prabhu, who was from Jagannath Puri, and the rest of the guys were from, because Banmars had a lot of disciples in villages.
Yeah.
Like he took me in 68, 9. He took me to, we actually went into what was still East Pakistan.
Yeah.
We actually took we took trains certain far, and then went to visit some ashram in Mayapur, and then we took a train, a small gauge train, in a bus, and then came to this river. And then we took then across the river. I was with Ban Maharaj and Babaji Maharaj, Krishnadas Babaji, and Ashram Maharaj, and some of Ban Maharaj's disciples. And we were bringing these push boats and cross a river, and then take a rickshaw to the next river and another boat, cross 3 rivers, with rafts. Mm-hmm. And you're in now we're in what is now Bangladesh, but at the time it was it was another country than India. Even then it was called East Pakistan. But I mean, there was no immigration. It was just, so we would go to these villages, and there'd be the village and the headmaster and the whole village of maybe 500-600 people, and everybody was his disciples. Mm-hmm. There was no Gaudiya out there. It was just they had a temple, and he was the guru, and he'd come once a year or once every few years, or they'd come to Brindavan to visit him there. And he had many villages like this. He had thousands of initiated disciples. They didn't have any Westerners, but he had thousands of initiated Indian disciples.
I'll just give a little background as well now, and you can help me with this as well, about who actually Bon Maharaj was. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I know he was from a Brahmin family. He was Bengali. Was he actually, his family, were they originally from East Bengal?
Yes.
Yeah. So just even
Right.
people, not everybody understands politically. I'll just give a little background. India got independence in 1947 from the British, and there was this whole problem. What they had this complex debacle about what to do with the Hindu and the Muslim populations, and so they chopped off India. They created a West Pakistan and an East Pakistan, and it was turned into this. And you're arriving before the real heavy, the shit hit the fan, and everybody knows about the concert for Bangladesh from George Harrison. But that's in the future. That's 1971. You're talking about an earlier time.
69. 69, yeah.
And in fact, the eastern part of Bengal was actually a much more Gaudiya Vaishnava culture, even more than West Bengal, because I've been there three
Right.
times. Very, very
Right.
devotional. And because many people, they just think, oh, Bangladesh is a Muslim country. They don't realize that this culture of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was massive all over Bengal. Many of my
Right.
friends in London, they're from this northern part of Bangladesh, Sylhet. And so at that time, so
It wasn't much different than it was during the time of Lord Chaitanya, when the
Yeah.
government was Muslim and all the devotees were living there under the Muslims.
And also at that time when you went and the time when I went, the lifestyle was hardly any different than from Chaitanya. A lot of the village, no electricity,
Right.
living in mud and bamboo huts, and that culture had been going on for centuries. Now, Bon Maharaj, just like Bhaktivedanta Swami, and many, not all of the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, but many of them were quite educated. They've been educated in English. They knew Bengali, Hindi, Sanskrit, and being a Brahmin and quite scholarly, this is why many of the young followers were attracted to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, because he was an incredible scholar, a Sanskrit scholar. He had weight and authority and his father. Now, Bon Maharaj, when people will see the photographs, was a very good-looking man, handsome man. He was very eloquent, and I was reading about when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati went on his big tour of South India. Bon Maharaj was the kind of front man and the main talker and presenter he was one of the main preachers. He was one of the very, very important spreaders of this Gaudiya Math outside of Bengal. And so, do you actually know the things that led to him actually going? What were the decisions leading to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati deciding to send him and the other people that he went? Because what was the actual year he came to London in the 30s? He was sent as an emissary. Was it 34?
I have to double check. I have to check that. It was before the war.
Yeah,
But the thing was that they were running around India, meeting all these Britishers who were either scholars or political leaders in India, the intelligentsia. At that time it was the British, and these Bon Maharaj and people like that were meeting, who could speak English, were meeting these people and trying to get them to come see their guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And when they would come to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they would all say, "Oh, they loved him, and you got to come to England and meet our king,"
Okay.
And so they kept asking us. So finally, he told Bon Maharaj and one other disciple to go to England and meet the king on his behalf.
Okay.
And they didn't go. They didn't go there for any other purpose but that, to go to meet the king and to meet scholars and discuss, the Gaudiya philosophy.
And who actually went along with with Bon Maharaj?
What was his name? I think Bharat was his name. Bharat Maharaj. There's a couple of times people
Wasn't
went.
Bhakti Vilas Tirtha? Was it Bhakti
No,
Vilas
Bhakti Vilas Tirtha was Kunja Bihari, and he didn't ever go.
But anyway, we can look up the names of the other people, but Bon Maharaj was the spearheader of that organization.
He was the best English speaker. He spoke really good English and was very sophisticated. Yeah.
But
he had a sophisticated air about him,
Yeah.
He carried himself like when I was living with him. He sent me to meet, after a few years, he sent me to meet really important people, even the president and people like that. I mean, I could meet anybody because of him. I mean, nobody even asked me what my real name was. I'm a sannyasi from Swami Ban. I can meet the president of India. I can meet Sumati Morarji. I can stay with Sumati Morarji. That's why Prabhupada could meet Samati Maharaj, because of Ban Maharaj, you know.
People want
Ban Maharaj, Ban Maharaj had a huge reputation in India. I saw it with my own eyes.
By the way, Sumati Maharaji was the lady who arranged for the passage for Prabhupada to come on the Jaladuta to America. She was a great Vaishnava based in Bombay. So Bon Maharaj has a great relationship with all these quite powerful people.
Right.
You know. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati started to get a bit ill at the end of 1936, and then eventually there's that famous picture where Bon Maharaj has arrived back in Calcutta. He's got those two foreigners, and right on the end you see Bhaktisiddhanta Swami with his moustache as a grihasta sitting right at the end. He was part of that welcoming committee, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, I think he actually passed on the 1st of January 1937. That was when he actually passed. So, yeah. And so so then what happened was, for about 10 years, that Gaudiya Math organization, it broke in, from about, after the part, from 1937, then they got partition in India in 1947, independence, and the Gaudiya Math kind of fragmented in a sense. So Bon Maharaj, do you know when he actually that ashram that you came to in Vrindavan? Do you know when it was established? When he got involved with that?
Well, after the disappearance of Bhakti Siddhanta, Ban Maharaj was disturbed by what was going on, that there was a infighting about who's going to be the next guru, and so he left, and he went to Varanasi. And he was on a raft, tied to the, in the middle of the river on a raft, just chanting all day. And he got inspired to go to the Himalayas on foot. And he made a trip 650 miles to Baidyanath, Kedarnath, Yamunotri, and Gangotri, barefoot. And took 4 vows. He would not take a single step without chanting Mahamantra. He would not speak with any person at all. And he would not eat anything except leaves and berries off of trees. And he would only sleep on the ground bare-bodied, And this is what he did. And it took like 6 months, and he walked the whole way from Varanasi. And then when he was there, he got inspired by his guru, Bhaktisiddhanta, to go to Vrindavan and serve Vrindavan. Okay. So his inspiration was, I'm going to go to Vrindavan and I'm going to make education available to the local people so they don't have to leave to go to the material existence to get education. And so he made that college. So, but he went back to Vrindavan. After that trip, he went back to Vrindavan. Before he got inspired to do this educational thing, he just went to Vrindavan. And he made a bhajan kutir, which had an underground room. He had an underground room that he would go in and do bhajan for years. For years he did this.
At that same place? It's at that same place?
It's under his room. Under his bedroom, there's a room, like a cave, and Babaji Maharaj used to do bhajan there when I was there.
So that was going on during the 40s and the 50s, was it?
The 30s. Okay. 30. Because he published the Bhagavad Gita in 1938, and then he went off on that trip. And then when he came back from that trip, he came to Vrindavan, and somebody gave him this land, and he started building a little bhajan kutir. And he just started doing bhajan, and he wasn't doing any preaching or anything. And so, but he had a room, underground room, and he was doing bhajan. And he was a Siddha Purush. He knew his Siddha Pranali. He didn't brag about it or talk about it, but all his godbrothers who were gurus all had that. And all their disciples knew that. If you didn't have your Siddha, if you didn't have self-realization, then what kind of a guru are you, So everybody thought, the Ban Maharaj, Madhav Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj, all of these his godbrothers, every one of their disciples knew that they had their realization. And one day I'll have mine, But they all did. Ban Maharaj knew what his spiritual form was. Bhakti, all of those guys did, And it wasn't like a thing that you make fun of. Like you bring this up to ISKCON, the Gopi Kebab Club, ha ha, how funny, how ridiculous. And it's like, yeah, well, that's the way a Westerner would see it, isn't it?
Matura's Nandana.